What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Rise Up Rich podcast. I am your host, David Haas. Thanks for taking the time to tune in. I think this episode is going to be good because it's about how to become more happy. And I know that this is a topic that you hear all about, and it's become a lot more mainstream about like following what it is you truly want to do, about really becoming happy is more important than making money or whatever else, getting that promotion at work. Happiness is starting to be put into the forefront, which I think is a good thing. But a lot of us don't know where to start when it comes to how to become happier. And if you listen to my podcast last week, which was about doing, you can realize that it's just about action. If you get into action, then the how will get answered. So if you want to become happier, then just get into action on becoming happier. Where do you start? Well, this podcast is going to reveal 7 things that you can do starting right after you're done listening that's going to make you happier. And the thing I like about this is that it applies to this pandemic as well. This is not just how to get happier during the pandemic. It's also how to be happier all the time. So vice versa applies. So if you learn how to be happy all the time, then you're going to be happy during a pandemic or during any other crisis. Like I have this thing that because of the personal development I've done, and because of the spiritual development I've done, I am completely unaffected by anything that happens outside of myself. Now, as I say that, I'm like, well, that's not really 100% true. I still get affected by things, but I have the awareness to take a look at when I do get triggered or when I do get affected and say, what's really going on here? I'm not holding it with me, for days, weeks, months, the rest of my life. I'm coming to the realization that I'm in the state of anger and I'm dealing with that. So this is about moving towards being completely unaffected by anything that happens outside of yourself and only focusing on what you can control, which is you and you alone. So this is really at the forefront of what I really teach. It's about the one thing that I discovered was that the reason I wasn't allowing myself to be happy was because I was placing all my happiness in the future. And as I learned to become happier, all of the things that I once desired began to flow into my life. So I was happy despite not having those things, which was, for me, it was money and it was the house and the cars and the wife and all that kind of thing. So as I learned how to become happier, and I was just happy without having those things, and those things began to flow into my life. And this is what manifesting is all about. It's about feeling the way you want to feel once you obtain the object or the thing that you desire most. It's not about actually obtaining it. We don't care really about making money. It's about how it makes us feel. We don't really care about getting into amazing shape. It's really about how we would feel when we're in amazing shape. So if you could learn to connect to those feelings before you have the money, before you have the house, before you have the relationship, before you're in amazing shape, and you really truly feel like you're already experiencing it, then that's when it will come into your life. And that's when also it'll be effortless. Not meaning that you're not going to have to do the work, yes, but it won't feel like work. It's because you're already happy. You're already feeling, you're in the state, you're in the field. Okay, so let's get into the tips. So just to recap though on that, it's like if you learn how to get happy now, you're going to get whatever it is you want to bring into your life. Whatever it is you feel like you're missing, and that once you obtain it, you're going to become happier. If you learn how to become happy in this moment, you're going to obtain it. It's just going to happen organically. So these are the things. And now this happened for me without even really truly realizing what was happening. It just kind of all happened organically. I was learning spiritual growth principles, personal development principles, and I just started to become happier. Like I was just allowing joy to come into my life again. And I was so miserable. Like I believed that I had to hustle and grind and work hard in order to be happy. Like that was the sacrifice I was going to make to obtain what it was that I wanted to obtain. But along that way, I was doing all this spiritual growth stuff, and I just started getting happier. And then all those things began to flow into my life, and all of a sudden they just showed up one day, and I was like, what the heck just happened here? I couldn't even understand it. So when I came up with these 7 principles that I'm going to explain to you here, it was from looking back. We have 20/20 vision when we're looking back. So it was because of self-reflection, and I created this so that I could help other people. I was like, what did I do that allowed me to become more happy, that allowed me to attract everything that I wanted into my life? I think it's a pretty important thing for other people to realize. And the thing about personal and spiritual development is it's very non-linear, and it's not like you can do, a 7-step process to get to grow spiritually or to be happy, because it just kind of happens randomly and sporadically. So that is the one thing that's a little bit frustrating about spiritual growth, is that, you can't really give it like 7 steps. So these 7 steps that I've created here, or 7, they're not even steps, it's 7 tactics that you can use or implement into your life to be happier. They might work differently than they work for you. You might have to add a few. I don't know what it is, but the point is that you just have to get into action. It's like, stop wondering how to become more happy and just start doing. And that was the entire podcast last week. So here are my principles, my 7 principles. Number 1 is integrity. Okay, so what is integrity? Basically, integrity means that you're an honest person. You don't tell lies, you don't cheat, you don't steal, but you also hold yourself to integrity. You don't lie to yourself. And now this seems pretty simple, and I'll challenge you, for the day today when you listen to this, just to not tell a single lie. Right? So if your wife comes up to you and says, "How do I look?" and she doesn't look good, you tell her the truth, right? And there's this saying that, you have to be brutally honest, but I don't believe that. I think you can be honest with love and respect. So I just try and speak my truth at all times. There's levels of integrity as well. Like, just stop telling little white lies is relatively simple, but you will get challenged by the universe. Once you make this commitment that I'm not going to tell any more lies, you'll see in your life where you once lied. And it's funny for me because I've really just dug into integrity, because I want to feel integrity at all levels. And now when I watch TV shows and stuff, and you can see people telling little white lies and how much trouble it gets them into, and I'm just like, why don't you just tell the truth? But we have resistance to telling the truth because we're fearful or whatever. There's something that's created this, why we're not telling the truth. And when you stop telling the truth, when you do, then the truth begins to be revealed to you, and you can start to get to the roots of why you're not just speaking your truth, right? It could be because you feel like you're not good enough and you have to tell lies about your life or whatever. I don't know. I'm not gonna make assumptions here, but for me, I think it was just I think it probably was about fitting in and wanting people to respect me. So I would tell little white lies to make my story sound better. But then I also realized that I didn't have integrity in other areas of my life because I was kind of like a yes man and I was a people pleaser. So when I would have a conversation with someone, I would just agree with them even if I didn't agree, because I wanted to make sure I didn't create conflict. But that also lacks integrity. What also lacks integrity is giving the nod of approval. If you know someone that's doing something shady and they ask you to participate, or you are going to benefit, but you're not the culprit of a lack of integrity, and just giving the nod of approval, then that also lacks integrity. So there's all these levels of integrity, and as you go deeper and as you start to become more honest as a person, honest with yourself, these levels will be revealed to you. I'm probably gonna have to do a whole entire podcast on the levels of integrity, because I think it's really, really important for you to be aware of these different levels of integrity. But the big thing about integrity is that every single time we tell a lie, or we do something wrong, or we cut a corner because it's going to benefit us, ultimately, subconsciously, what we're saying to ourselves is that we're not a good person. And how can you be happy if subconsciously you feel like you're undeserving or unworthy? You can't. So when we start to live a life of integrity, we start to begin to feel like we're deserving, like we're worthy of happiness. And this is why I made this number 1, because for me, it was the game changer, right? This is where all the awareness began, was just by starting to live a life of 100% complete integrity. And yes, I've slipped up over the course of time, but I don't judge myself for it, and I just get back on track, right? So if you feel like you're undeserving, it's going to be very hard to feel happy. And the way I know how to feel like you're more deserving and more worthy is to stop telling lies and start being an honest person. So that's a really good place to start. And the challenge for the day is to stop telling lies. Stop telling little white lies, and you'll see where in your life you would have lied about something so stupid, and how subconsciously you're telling yourself that you're a bad person. The second one is gratitude, and I've talked a lot about gratitude, and I mean, you hear gratitude all over the place. The big thing about gratitude is that it's so simple that you probably won't do it, right? I have this saying, or it's a saying that I've heard before, that is, success is simple. It's just a matter of doing small, simple, daily tasks consistently. So the problem with that is, because it's so simple, we don't do it. So how do you implement integrity into your life? It's really simple. It's insanely simple. Every single morning, wake up and write 10 things that you're grateful for. Now, these things can be as small as I'm grateful for this pen to be able to write out that I'm grateful, to as big as you're grateful for your friends, your families, your spouse, whatever it may be. But what I challenge you to do is every morning is try and write different things. The big ones can stay if you want, but try and search for what you're really grateful for. Be grateful for the fact that you have the ability to listen to this podcast in your car or while you're on a walk or wherever the hell you are right now. Be grateful that you wake up and you have electricity and running water. Be grateful that you live in one of the richest countries in the world that has been able to, support us during this whole pandemic that we're going through. It's just like about searching, it's about be grateful that you have food in the fridge, you can go to the grocery store. It's just endless. And what will happen? And you have to keep at it. I had to practice gratitude on a daily basis for about 3 or 4 weeks until one day it was just switched on inside of me and I could not turn it off. Literally every single second I look around the room and I think about things that I'm completely 100% grateful for. And when you live in this state of gratitude all the time, it's hard not to be happy because it gets you focused on what you do have and gets you to stop focusing on what you don't have. So it's the major switch. It's also a way to pull us out of apathy, which is that victim mentality. The whole world is against me. When you start to look at all the things that are good in the world and you stop focusing on the bad, it begins to make you a more happy person. It's really just that simple. That leads me into the third, which is take full responsibility. Now, this goes into like that apathetic person is where they blame the government, they blame their family situation, they blame their mom, they blame their dad, they blame whatever. They just are constantly passing the blame. They're not taking any responsibility for where they are at in their life. Usually, people that are in this state are in, just not great places in their lives. They probably are struggling with money. They're probably struggling with relationships. They're probably struggling with happiness, right? And it's all because of things that are out there. There came to a point in my life, and I'll just give you a quick little example. I was at that place. I was apathetic, and that was huge for me because when I was 9 years old, my mom died, and from that moment forward, I became the victim. Poor me, my mom died, and I used that victim card in every single scenario. I used it to get better grades. I used it to convince people to give me loans so that I could open up businesses. I used it for everything, right? And it was because I was the victim. And when the shit finally really hit the fan for me, when I was $300,000 in debt, I had multiple failing businesses. I had to get really real with myself. And I said, there is no one besides myself that has gotten me to this situation. Before that realization, it was the government's fault. I was in the wrong industry. It was my business partner's fault. It was my employee's fault. It was everybody's fault except for my own. So I had to get really real. I looked at every single situation in my life and I said, what did you do to bring you to this current situation where you are? And it was hard. But the thing that came out of this that was so unbelievable was that when I was in this state, I was giving away all my power. When the government is the reason that you're not successful, then you are completely powerless. But when you take that responsibility back and you say, no, it wasn't the government that got me to $300,000 in debt. It was me. It was my decisions. It was because I was drinking too much alcohol. I was partying too much. I wasn't focused. I was all over the place. I was too focused on the money, whatever it was, whatever the reasons. But I took full responsibility. And David Goggins, he has a great book called Can't Hurt Me. And he has this thing called the accountability mirror where you basically just look in the mirror and you tell it to yourself straight, right? It's like, you're fat, you're lazy, whatever you want to tell yourself. And it's a little bit more harsh than this, but really it comes down to taking full responsibility. And I took it all the way down to taking full responsibility for the death of my mother and how I reacted to that death and how I allowed myself to be the victim and how I was basically the victim from 9 years old to 33 years old, which was just awful. And I can now look back and see perfectly how every single decision came from this victim mentality, and that victim mentality was driving every single decision, every single behavior. And this is why spiritual growth is so important, because you have to have the opportunity to look back and say, why are you doing the things that you do? That is not who you are. You are not a victim when you're born. You're this perfect, innocent being. And these behaviors, these patterns, these programs, they come from somewhere. And this is what spiritual development is all about. It's about understanding what programs we're buying into, what belief systems we're buying into, and learning how to be free of them, learning where they started so that we can be free of them forever. So for me, taking full responsibility was a game changer because it allowed me to come to this one major realization that if I was the reason that I got myself into $300,000 in debt, and if I was the reason I had multiple failing businesses, and if I was the reason my relationships failed, and if I was the reason that my car got repossessed, then I alone would be the reason to get myself out of that situation. And it was empowering as fuck. It was so empowering because now I was like, no one besides me is responsible for anything. This is what I was talking about at the beginning of this podcast, is that it's like, I want to be in a place where I'm completely unaffected by anything outside of myself. And this is a great example. We're in this pandemic where, people are shrinking, right? And I'm not going to blame the pandemic, for this situation. My primary business is completely closed. I'm losing hundreds of thousands of dollars a month being closed, and well, in sales, but profitability. I'm losing $30,000 or $40,000 a month in profitability. That's just money I'm not going to get back. But am I going to collapse and shrink? No, because I'm not blaming the coronavirus. How can I make this situation better? So what am I doing? I'm expanding my coaching business. I have this huge online platform that's coming out soon. We're renovating at the bar, so when people come back, they're going to come back to new floors, a cleaner environment. It's going to be absolutely amazing, right? So I'm not sinking into my old victim mentality. I've grown from that, and when you take back your power, you naturally become happier because now you can't be affected. If the government can change a rule and you're like, okay, I'll adapt, I'm good, because it's I guess it's a confidence thing as well. It's about confidence. When you're confident, you're happy. So that leads me into the next step, which is step 4, was that in order to get, you have to give. It is in giving that we receive. And this was a really hard one. And I came to this realization by reading a lot of books. And the more and more I read, the more this theme of giving was just coming up. And before I read this, and before I started creating this awareness around giving, I was never at a point where I was the person to give. If someone asked me to donate $5 to a charity, I was like, no, I'm the charity. I need the money. How could I donate $5 to a charity, right? So when I came to that realization, I was like, okay, well, this is basically what I think, is that if I can give, if this giving thing really is working, right, then what I want to do is I want to try it out. Simple idea, which was I was just going to start giving. So anytime I would go to the grocery store, I would go to the drugstore, and they would ask me for that donation, which used to annoy the hell out of me. Do you want to donate $2 to this? Do you want to do it? And I would always say no because I was the charity. So because I had read in all these books that if you give, you're going to get, you're going to receive. You have to give to receive. I said, let's put it into practice. Let's see what actually happens. So every time, my rule was this. Every time they asked me for the $2, I would donate. So I started doing this for about 2 or 3 weeks. And the first thing I came to the realization is that even if I was giving more money, it wasn't affecting my life in any single way. Like I wasn't missing that money I was giving away. The second thing is that it started to change my mindset around money. I think probably because I noticed it wasn't affecting me, but it changed my mindset around money that I was holding on to my money so tight. Like I believed if I put $2 out, it was never going to come back to me. But what I learned over time is that the more I started to put out, the more that started to come in. And then I was like, oh, this is it. There's something to this giving. And then I started implementing into my business and my restaurant. And I started looking at where could I give to my employees? Where could I give to my customers? And instead of creating promotions and trying to look how I could get more customers into the door, all I did was flip the script and was like, how could I give as much value as possible to my customers? And once I made that transition, my business practically doubled in a year and a half. And it was an amazing thing to watch. It was amazing to be a part of that. And, people always ask me, like, how have you been able to be successful for 20 years? And it probably was because of spiritual growth and personal development. If I wouldn't have made the shift from giving to getting, my business probably still wouldn't be here, because it's one of the most competitive markets in the entire world, the bar and restaurant industry. And I just don't think we would have survived if we wouldn't have been focused on giving back to our customers and giving back to our employees. So I think the challenge for you here is this. It's like, doesn't matter how much money you have or don't have in the bank, start giving. If you work in a job, instead of asking how you're going to get your paycheck, start looking at how you can give to your employee. But then it relates to all areas of life. It's like, how can you give to your spouse? How can you give to your boyfriend or girlfriend? How can you give back to your family, your mom and dad, who you might be holding resentment towards, but they gave you the gift of life? So it's like, how do you give back to them? And it's like, once you start doing this, everything completely 100% transforms in your life, and it makes you feel more happy because you see the change. I mean, I was just on Instagram yesterday, and someone from India was messaging me and asking me a question, and they were so grateful that I responded to them and I helped them through a struggle. And I was like, this is what this is about. It's about giving back. And in the end, when we have satisfied all of our own needs, when we have done everything that we ever wanted to do, we all end up coming back to giving to others. And that's what this life is really all about. And you can incorporate into whatever it is that you do. You don't have to have your own business. You don't have to be a spiritual guru. You can start giving today. So that is challenge number 4, is just start giving back. You don't have to do the $2 thing, but just look for opportunities to give. And the more opportunities you look, the more you'll find. The more you give, the more you'll receive. It's literally that simple. And receiving is what will also make you happier, right? So the next one is define your purpose. Now, this is obviously super loaded because it's like, what is it that you want to do? And I know that everyone's completely hung up on what they want to do. And a lot of people are hung up on, they have no clue what it is they want to do. Okay, so how did I discover my purpose? And I'm just going to give you my own personal experience, and hopefully it'll help you. The first thing is, I started asking questions like, what would I do if money didn't matter? Because I was so hung up on the money. So it's like, what would I do if money didn't matter? And some things started being revealed to me. One thing that was revealed to me is that I love to teach. And I used to have this belief system that those who can do and those who can't teach. And because of that belief system, every time teaching would kind of pop up into my radar, I would dismiss it because of one single belief system. But I have the belief that I can do anything that I want. So I want to make sure that it's aligned with what I truly want to do and what brought me joy in my life in the past. Well, I used to be an avid wakeboarder, and I used to love teaching people. I said this in the last podcast. I used to love teaching people to wakeboard. I found so much joy in that. I sail now. I love getting new people on the boat and teaching them how to sail, and like watching the elation in their face when, we start going 7-8 knots and it's completely silent. It's just us and the wind. There's no motor. It's amazing for people to see that, right? And I knew that inherently I was a teacher, just like my mom was. My mom was a minister, and even at a young age, I said, I want to be a minister. Like, I want to do what you do, because she would get up and deliver these amazing sermons. And she was so well received in the church community. Like, people loved her. Actually, people loved her so much that one of the members of the church gave both my brother and I a $5,000 education fund to my mom and dad. And my brother ended up using it. So my entire university was practically paid for because this is how much people loved my mother. And I was like, I want that. I want to be able to help people the way she did. So when I was a kid, I said I want to be a minister. So that's the second way you can start getting connected to your purposes. What is it you want to do when you were a kid? When I was a kid, the first thing I ever wanted to do was I wanted to be a minister. The other thing I wanted to be was a stand-up comedian. The other thing I wanted to be was a stuntman. Right? So when I look back at those, I started to develop like an idea of what it was I truly wanted. One is like, I want to be speaking, right? And I also looked at how I performed as a kid. When I was a kid, I was always giving speeches. Like when I had company over, I would be the kid that would like put on the puppet show or do whatever, right? So I was like, okay. I started to get aligned with that, right? And when I asked myself what I would do with if money didn't matter, one of the things that came up was teaching. The next thing you have to ask yourself, and this is a really good one, I think, is like, what would you do if you couldn't fail? If there was no chance that you were going to fail, what is it that you would do? And when you start asking yourself a question like that, you start getting to a bigger purpose, right? if I couldn't fail, what I would do is I would speak to millions and millions of people and help them transform their lives the way my life is transformed because of spiritual principles. If I couldn't fail, I would cure cancer, right? So these are kind of some of the things that come up. But what it is like it's getting you past your blocks, which is fear, right? Fear of judgment, fear of failure. These are some of the blocks. So what would you do if you couldn't fail? So if you start asking yourself these questions, you might get more in tune to what it is you truly want to do. The other thing, though, is that you can also, after you do this, you might get an idea of what it is you want to do. You might want to just start going out and doing, especially if you're young. You want to go out and taste. You want to go out there and keep trying new things. The more that you go out and taste, the more you're going to get an idea of what it is you do like to do and what it is you don't like to do. As a kid, I had multiple jobs. I worked in a car dealership, washing cars. I worked at a golf course, at a driving range, picking up golf balls, and people would drive golf balls at my cart when I was trying to pick up the golf balls. I worked as in corn detasseling. I had created my own window washing business. I got into the bar business, and slowly I started to develop an idea of what it was I loved to do and what it was I hated to do. So when you're young, you just got to go out and do, because as you do, the how gets answered, right? So the thing that happens from defining your purpose is when you're truly connected to what it is you want to do, you'll be full of energy of life. So every single time that you go into work and it's around your purpose or around your definite purpose, it's just like, this is what you're going to do for the rest of your life. I have the saying that I have no desire to retire, right? And that's because I'm truly aligned with what it is I want to do. I'm going to be doing this. I'm going to be doing podcasts. I'm going to be doing, releasing content. I'm going to be coaching people one-on-one. I'm going to be speaking to millions of people at some point in my life. And I'm going to be doing that forever. So that's when you're aligned with what it is you want to do. It's like, you're not doing this to retire. You're not doing this to, get a paycheck. You're doing it because it's your passion. There's a huge difference in energy there, right? And when you get connected to that energy, it ends up making you more happy. It's like every day when you wake up, you're excited to go to work. I almost actually dread the downtime. Instead of living for my weekends, I live to kind of come into work and to really put out amazing content, to connect with people, to help people. On the weekends is my relaxing time, when I'm hanging out with my wife and my daughter, which I love, but it's just like, I'm like on Monday, I'm ready to get back to work, right? So that purpose creates energy, and that energy creates happiness. The next is number 6. So hold on. On number 5, what I want you to do on number 5 is do the lottery experiment. And what the lottery experiment is just write out everything you would do if you won $100 million in the lottery. Where would you travel? What kind of house would you live in? What kind of car would you buy? And just keep asking yourself, and then what, and then what, and then what? And that'll help you get to an idea of what you might do after all of your needs are met. Okay? The second thing you can do is do the deathbed exercise, which is like imagine yourself laying on your deathbed, right? Who's around you? What are they saying to you? What are you saying to them? It just gives you an indicator of the kind of life that you want to lead. The other thing is you can ask yourself the question, what would you do if you couldn't lose, right? The last thing you could do is you could sit in meditation and you just could just ask for the truth to be revealed, right? Connect to a higher power, connect to your higher self. And, we are here to remember what our soul already knows. And what our soul knows is what our definite purpose is. So we want that to be revealed. We have not gotten completely disconnected from our higher selves. When we learn how to reconnect to our higher self, the truth of our highest purpose will be revealed to us. So those are the practical things that you could do to get happier. That's just in step 5. Okay, so step 6 is to be present. And this is probably the hardest, the second hardest of these 7. And the present moment is where the mind does not exist. When we are just completely present and we are completely focused on the present moment, there is no room for the past to come in, and there is no room for the future to come in. That is the beauty of the present moment. In this present moment, everything is perfect. When we only create regret and guilt when we look to the past, and we only create stress and anxiety when we look to the future. But in the present moment, none of that exists. So the more we can learn to connect to the present moment, the more happy we're going to become, because we're going to be free of regret and guilt, and we're going to be free of stress and anxiety. Sounds like a pretty amazing place to live. How do you get connected to the present moment? Well, one is that you meditate, right? What we're doing in meditation was we're learning to observe our thoughts. We're learning to take a step back and clear our minds, right? We're not trying to shut our thoughts off. We just want to get into observer mode and allow ourselves to connect to the present moment. It is only in the present moment that the unknown will be revealed to us. I'm going to repeat that. It is only in the present moment that the unknown will be revealed to us. Meaning, whenever we have a problem, whenever we have an issue, we go to one place, which is the circle of what we know. In order to get outside of that circle, in order to get tapped into infinite intelligence, to get tapped into all knowingness, all power, all presence. The only way to get tapped into that is to get connected to the present moment, because that's where the unknown will be revealed to us. And this is how we get the answer to any single question, is by tapping into that present moment. You can check out Dr. Joe Dispenza's work on this, because he's about to bring this information to the mainstream, because he's putting science and things. He's getting rid of the mysticism of it all, right? For me, it's just like, I don't want to prove it exists. I already know it exists, right? So I just want to experience it so that the truth can be revealed to me. So those are the tips on how you get connected to the present moment. The other thing that you can do, though, is you can just pick a few times throughout the day when you just go into observer mode and you begin to observe your thoughts. So when you're in the shower, just take a step back, and observe what's going on in the mind. When we shine the light of awareness on our thoughts, we begin to take back our power. Okay, so I do it in the shower. I do it every time I get into my car. I drive for the first minute and a half, 2 minutes with my radio off, where I can just observe what's going on in my mind. This is when we get connected to the present moment. And the more and more that we do that, the more and more clarity that we have, and the more happy we become, because our thoughts are no longer controlling us. We're not living in the past. We're not living in the future. We're learning to live in the present moment, and we're not the victim, or we're not at the mercy of our ego or of our mind. We are in control. This creates more happiness. So that would be challenge number 6. The last one is to surrender. And I know that you've heard this word surrender a lot, and it's very cloudy. I mean, surrender is number 7 for me, because I think I had to go through 1 through 6 in order to understand what surrender really was. But ultimately, if you could just surrender, you could probably avoid having to go through these steps altogether. What is surrender? Surrender is ultimately saying to a higher power of your understanding, your higher self, whatever it may be, the universe, God, it doesn't matter. This is not religious, right? And saying, I need help, right? Like the first, if you look at AA, step 1 is, I always mess this up. I really got to memorize this, but step 1 is like, I am powerless over my addiction. And what that ultimately is just basically a way of getting them to come to this realization that they need help, right? And they look for that help from a higher power. So the same is true for us, is like, just getting to a point where you need help. And ultimate surrender is just turning your life over to that higher power, right? My mentor is in a place in his life where he just wakes up every single day and says, for him, it's God. It's God, what do you want me to do today? And then he just waits for the guidance, and then he goes and does that. And I know that sounds out there, but I'm not even at that place myself, but I'm getting more and more connected to it, right? And, part of this kind of relates back to these steps, which is the one step is giving, right? We always, when we're completely self-centered, and like I've said before, we become so egocentric. When we're in this egocentric place, we say things like, well, once I get some savings, then I'll start giving back to other people. Or, once I buy the house, then I'm going to start helping other people. But if helping people is the ultimate end goal, why don't we just help people right from the get-go? This would be a lot faster path to getting to where we want to go. But everyone wants to get their own needs met first, and then they want to surrender their life. But the fastest way to get your needs met is to surrender, right? Is to give back, is to get connected to this ultimate power. So how do you surrender? And I don't even know if I'm even an amazing, person to be talking about this, but basically it's this. It's like, anytime you're facing a challenge, I'm basically turning it over to a higher power and saying, I need help with this. I do not have the answer. Please reveal the truth to me. And I wait for a message, right? But every single time I do that, some way, shape, or form, the truth is always revealed. It may not be just in that meditation, right? But it's like, it comes to me. Let me give you an example. One of the things that I've struggled with for so long is my addiction to sugar, right? And because when I was 9, I was taking care of myself. And if you leave a 9-year-old in charge of his diet, it's going to be pretty messy, right? So I grew up eating sugar and hot dogs and Lucky Charms, like this the worst diet in the entire world. And luckily I was able to make a turnaround, but I was still really I ate a high sugar diet. And when I'm trying to answer the question of why, a lot was revealed to me. And one of the things that was revealed to me was that I needed a caretaker in my life. I was always looking for a caretaker because I never really had a caretaker. And I came to that realization that I needed to become my own caretaker, but I didn't know how really. Like, I didn't know how to make that transition. I got it. Like, I had to make my own food and do these things. But it wasn't feeling it. So I just basically surrendered it. And I kind of just forgot about it. Like, I just basically said, I wrote it on a piece of paper, and for me it's God, but it's like, God, it's like, I need to solve this problem and I need your help, right? So please help me with this. And I'm not saying that the coronavirus was created for me to solve this problem, but during this coronavirus, one of the things that has happened is that I've become my own caretaker. And my wife has been helping because we haven't been eating out at all. We've eaten out, we've ordered takeout twice in the last 6 weeks, right? Where we used to order takeout every single day. So finally, I've become my own caretaker. Even when I come into my office, I'm bringing my own food, I'm not allowing myself to get hungry and then binging out on sugar. It's finally been revealed to me. And now I'm, a month in of no sugar, 100% no sugar at all. And it just came to me. I wasn't forcing it. I just surrendered it over. And this is, I guess, a very poor example, but this is what surrender is all about. If you want to make $1 million, then surrender it over, and it'll come to you, right? Stop being attached to the outcome. Stop putting a date on when you need to do things. Just surrender it over. If it's in the highest good for you and for the entire world, it'll come into your life. So the one thing that you could do with surrender, the one task I could give you, is just to write out everything that you want in your life and then say, I surrender this over to whatever your belief is in a higher power. I know that one's out there, and that's why it's number 7. If you're not feeling number 7, then start with the other ones, because the other ones are very, very practical and simple, right? The last 2, be present and surrender, are probably the most difficult. But the first 5 are they're actually insanely simple. They're not relatively simple, they're insanely simple. And that simplicity might be the barrier to you not doing it. So now anytime someone says, I don't know how to get happy, you can just come back to this podcast and listen and start implementing these things and putting them into action, because that's what's going to create the happiness that you desire. So I'm going to leave it at that. These are real practical tips that you can put into place. And the other things that I should probably put in here, one other thing that just came to mind as I'm saying is this knowledge, right? I've dedicated my life to spiritual and personal development. So I know I've recently been talking a lot about doing, right? But knowledge has not taken a back seat for me. Like, I am constantly on my way here to the office today, I was listening to an audiobook, right? I am just constantly consuming knowledge at all times, right? But knowledge is useless if you don't put it into action. So as you gain more, and you don't need to gain more knowledge to get into action. That's the other thing. Just get into action. These tips, you don't need any more knowledge. Maybe surrender, you might need a little bit more knowledge, but you have what you need. So just get into action. But don't put knowledge on the back burner also. Still learn, still consume as much knowledge as you possibly can, and just make sure you keep putting into action. If you do this, you're going to become happier. I 100% guarantee it. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for taking the time to listen to the podcast. Don't forget, go to my website. It's davidhaas.ca. You can view all my content there. If you're interested in coaching, I also have a consultation. You can book a consultation for free. And I have a 10 tips PDF on how to expand during the coronavirus. So make sure you go there and check that out. And I look forward to delivering another podcast next Wednesday.